usually I go over Noah's because, he's my boyfriend.
But life has not always been this easy.
Like as Sebastian, like I couldn't go to school without inducing myself to throw up or like trying to get different ways to get out of school.
You heard her right. Hannah was born Sebastian, the middle of 3 children growing up in Pawtucket. At only 10 years old, Hannah's mom says her child already knew she was born in the wrong body.
Well, there was one day she came home after being educated about what sex change operations were. And she walked into the house and said, "I want to be a girl."
All right, guys. So a great victory today in the Supreme Court for all people with sane, rational thinking minds. People who care about children and want to give them the opportunities to develop into healthy-minded adults. And anyways, I picked up this article. I wanted to share it with you guys, and let's just move right on into it. All right, so the Supreme Court upholds Tennessee ban on transgender treatment for minors. The Supreme Court on Wednesday upheld Tennessee's ban on transgender puberty blockers and hormone therapy treatments for minors in a 6-3 decision and a major win for the 24 states with similar laws on the book. So this is going to affect half of the nation. This is going to protect children, the development of young children in half of the nation that didn't provide those protections previously. Chief Justice John Roberts authored the majority opinion backed by his 5 fellow conservative justices, which held that Tennessee's law doesn't violate the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. The 3 liberal justices dissented. This case carries with it the weight of fierce scientific and political debates about the safety, efficacy, I think is the thing, because there is no scientific evidence. Lives are saved. I know the left likes to use the argument that it's life-saving treatment. There is no evidence to support that. And proprietary, why can't I say that? And propriety of medical treatments in an evolving field. Roberts acknowledged in the majority opinion, our role is only to ensure that it does not violate the equal protection guarantee of the 14th Amendment, he went on. Having concluded it does not, we leave questions regarding its policy to the people, their elected representatives, and the democratic process. In 2023, Tennessee passed Senate Bill number 1 to prohibit health care providers from administering procedures on minors with the purpose of enabling a minor to identify with or live as a purported identity inconsistent with the minor's sex. The law includes exemptions for children with congenital defects or chromosomal anomalies, transsex children. That's an entirely separate entity, an entirely separate category or conversation than what the left generally, or I shouldn't say all the LGBT community, but many of the LGBT community try to conflate the transgender with trans sex. I hope I said that right. The Biden administration, 3 transgender minors, their parents, and a doctor promptly challenged the law, drawing mixed decisions in the lower courts, the most recent of which the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit backed Tennessee. More than 1.6 million Americans aged 13 and older identify as transgender, according to data cited by the Supreme Court. A district court had found that the plaintiffs lacked standing to challenge the ban on transgender surgeries for minors, which is why the Supreme Court focused on its implications for puberty blockers and hormone therapy treatments specifically. The law's ban on surgeries for transgender minors was not brought before the High Court. Well, let's hope that one is brought before the High Court eventually, because I know there are going to be some of you watching this who are going to say those surgeries don't happen and that's bull crap. It's just utter and complete nonsense. Those surgeries do happen. Children are given transgender surgeries. Let's remember, in the United States, anyone under 18 is a minor, though I think we should raise that a little bit myself. Plaintiffs argued that the law is based on sex-based classifications and should therefore face heightened scrutiny, a rigorous standard over whether it violates the Equal Protection Clause's protections against sex discrimination. See, you can't say sex discrimination is the same. And on one hand, we have the supporters of this transgender thing, saying that gender and sex are different, but in this case, when it benefits them, they want to lump the two together and say it violates it's sex discrimination. We can't do that. See, you want it both ways. They want it to benefit them either way that it can be used. Whether or not SB 1 is subject to heightened scrutiny was the central question before the Supreme Court. The majority opinion found it does not because it is essentially relying on sex-neutral classifications and therefore upheld the law. SB 1 incorporates two classifications. First, SB 1 classifies on the basis of age. Second, SB 1 classifies on the basis of medical use. Roberts noted in his opinion, neither of the above classifications turns on sex. Rather, SB 1 prohibits healthcare providers from administering puberty blockers and hormones to minors for certain medical uses, regardless of a minor's sex, he added. This court has never suggested that mere reference to sex is sufficient to trigger heightened scrutiny. Roberts also rejected concerns that the Tennessee law discriminated against individuals on the basis of their transgender status, concluding that the state merely removed one option from the range of treatable conditions for minors and that individuals over the age of 18 could still receive them. Again, if you are 18, personally, my personal view is that the age of adulthood consent should be raised past 18. I think maybe 20, but that's just my personal view, my personal thoughts. But no one is going to ever, I hope not, no one will ever try to put into law that you can't do whatever the hell it is you want to do with your body after you turn 18. Liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor penned a scathing dissent and read it aloud from the bench on Wednesday to underscore her fierce objections. I won't go into that. The majority subjects a law that plainly discriminates on the basis of sex. It does not. See, this is where they want to conflate, confine sex and gender into the same category. Whereas when they try to explain this, this mental issue, they want to call it gender and sex are different things. On the basis of sex to mere rational-based review. By retreating from meaningful judicial review, exactly where it matters the most, the court abandons transgender children and their families to political whims. In sadness, I dissent, she wrote. See, nobody abandons because if you and I don't encourage this, I don't support this, and I don't want you to do this. But if you feel that it is best for your child that they live life as the opposite sex, I think it's abusive. But if you feel that's necessary for your child, you're still allowed to dress them up as the opposite sex if you like. So nobody's being abandoned. We're just this ruling just looks out for the health, safety, and well development of children. into adulthood. When provided in appropriate cases, gender-affirming medical care can meaningfully improve the health and well-being of transgender adolescents, reducing anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and for some patients, the need for more invasive surgical treatments later in life, she added. This is the one that they always try to use, suicidal ideation. This is treatment it's life-saving medical care or whatever. That's false. That's fake. If you think that's true, you need to do much more work, much more research into the evidence of that, because there is no evidence that the suicide rate is lessened by having surgeries or whatever. And not only that, but I think there was one study that is always pointed to that says that is the case, that there were less suicides. But what is regretfully unacknowledged in those claims is that this study showed positive outcomes for patients as long as they continued therapy after the treatment. What we need is more studies to see about therapy without the treatment and compare those two. And I don't know if those studies are out there, but if you have them, send them to me. Put them down in the comments. I'd like to read it. Reducing anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. Okay. Tennessee's ban applies no matter what the minor's parent and doctor think, with no regard for the severity of the minor's mental health conditions. I find it funny that they put minor's mental health condition. If this is a mental health condition, why are we treating it with physical treatments, or the extent to which treatment is medically necessary for an individual child? It isn't medically necessary for it. It is never necessary for medically necessary for any child to cut their body parts off, to sterilize them and amputate their bodies. Her dissent was backed by fellow liberal Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson in whole and Elena Kagan in part. It took direct aim at Roberts' premise that SB 1 targeted medical purpose and age, arguing that the flaw in his logic is that SB 1 prohibits is defined by reference to the patient's sex. SB 1 does not just mention sex. It defines an entire category of prohibited conduct based or inconsistency with sex, she continued, and it is hard to imagine a law that prohibits conduct inconsistent with sex that could avoid intermediate scrutiny. Kagan issued a separate dissent, noting that she agreed with Sotomayor that SB 1 qualifies for heightened scrutiny, but that she takes no view on how SB 1 would fare under heightened scrutiny. One key area, oh shoot, I've lost it. Let me get back here. One key area that Roberts' major opinion did not address is whether laws that make classifications on the basis of one's status as transgender should face heightened scrutiny the way that sex discrimination would. See, gender, sex. They want to lump these two together in this case. I've said that multiple times now. Conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett filed a concurring opinion joined by fellow conservative Justice Clarence Thomas. Well, this one's, I'm going to say, as of recently with this one, I'm kind of surprised. Concluding that classifications and law on transgender status should not be subject to heightened scrutiny. Indeed, this court has not recognized any new constitutionally protected classes in over 4 decades, and instead has repeatedly declined to do so, she wrote. For purposes of the 14th Amendment, the relevant question is whether the group has been subject to a long-standing pattern of discrimination in the law. In other words, we ask whether the group has suffered a history of de jure discrimination. Existing suspect classes had such a history. Beyond the treatment of gender dysphoria, transgender status implicates several other areas of legitimate regulatory policy, ranging from access to restrooms to eligibility for boys and girls sports teams, she added. If laws that classify based on transgender status necessarily trigger heightened scrutiny, then the courts will inevitably be in the business of closely scrutinizing legislative choices in all these domains. Thomas and conservative Justice Samuel Alito also filed additional concurring opinions addressing their other technical aspects of the case. Hillary Eden Hoover, the parade grand marshal, Brooke Eden that's not part of the article, sorry. The case United States versus Skermeti was one of the most high-profile issues on the Supreme Court dockets this term, alongside President Trump's challenge against birthright citizenship, a case that is really more about the extent of lower court powers to block presidential action. Now, I'm interested to hear that one because I know that's a whole other topic, and I'm just going to say real quick that it's absurd to me that a lower court judge can basically have the power over executive policy. That's insane. And a few years ago, Justice Kagan agreed with that sentiment. But anyhow, all right. So that's what I got for you on this one. If you got anything of value out of this, if you enjoyed it, if you'd like to see more videos like this one, let me know in the comments. If you didn't, let me know in the comments. Please leave a like or even an unlike. I'm good with an unlike. That's information. Like, unlike, and consider subscribing. I'll catch you guys later. Thanks.